God gave Isaac a hundredfold return when he planted during the famine. And folks, if that's the case, that God did all of this, maybe we've got to reframe our whole mindset and stop thinking that we're going to go do something amazing with God's help, but instead that God is actually going to do this. Okay, so this is the verse. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean on into thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he'll direct your paths. Thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is he that giveth thee power to get wealth, that he may establish his covenant, which he sware unto his fathers, as it is this day. Proverbs 3, 9, and 10. Honor the Lord with thy substance and with the first fruits of all thine increase. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy presses shall burst out with new wine. It doesn't say find the best business model. It doesn't say find the best audience. It doesn't say find the audience that has the most money. It doesn't say all of those things that we learn today in today's business. It says, honor the Lord with thy substance and with the first fruits, and then your barns will be filled and your presses shall burst out with new wine. Is that true or is it not? And if it's true, shouldn't we run our business according to that truth? Proverbs 11, 24 through 26 says, there is that scattereth and yet increaseth, and there is that withholdeth more than is meet, but it tendeth to poverty. The liberal soul shall be made fat, and he that watereth shall be watered also himself. He that withholdeth corn, the people shall curse him, but blessing shall be upon the head of him that selleth it. And these are just basic principles for having our eyes set on God. 2 Corinthians 9, 6 through 8. But this I say, he which soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly, and he which soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully. Every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that ye always having all sufficiency in all things may abound to every good work. Here's the thing, just based on those three verses, if I were to say that God had a success plan, the success plan looks an awful lot like he gives us the power to get rich. He has the blessing of the corn on us, okay? Meaning that when we give out of what's inside of us, we set up God's economy. I've taught on this a lot in the business. One of the things that I do in my business is I give an amazing amount of training away for free. And obviously, I hope and expect and pray that 3 to 5% of people that get the free stuff will say, you know what, I'd like to have more, and I'm willing to pay for it. And I know a lot of people in this business, they begrudge the 95 or 97% that never pay anything. What if we could flip that around and just say, look, I'm paying it forward. I'm paying a tithe in my business of my knowledge of 90%. I just need 5 or 10% of people to say, you know what, Sean, I value you enough that I'll give you $100 a month to be able to learn more. And to all the people that don't value me enough, that's okay. Or that can't afford me enough, that's okay. Because God takes care of me with the 10% or 5% of people that say, I'm willing to pay for more. And then the third part of God's success plan is the giving out of Corinthians. Give, and it should be given unto you. And this is in Luke. Give, and it should be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together. Shall God give into your bosom, right? Or shall other people give into your bosom? I think that's really interesting. God says that we give. The return actually comes through other people. And we combine that with working the land. And that's working your business. Be diligent. I think this is really powerful. This is where discipline comes in. A lot of people look at my business and they say, Sean, have you accomplished the things that you've accomplished? Well, number one, God is number one and God has blessed me. Number two, I've been very blessed to find some business models that over the years have worked well. Those business models are not the same as they were 17 years ago. Most corporations have changed in 17 years, and so have I. But I'll tell you, the third thing is that I work kind of hard. I make slides like this. I come teach. And I don't want this to get into a braggy kind of thing. I don't want that. But I think if I didn't take the next 30 seconds and tell you a little bit about what I do, you might come away thinking, well, it's possible to get rich overnight. It's possible to have the 2-minute workday. I wrote 1,500 articles when I started my business 17 years ago. I've got over 300 published videos on YouTube. I've done, I don't know, somewhere between 7 and 10, not 7 and 10, 7 and 10,000 recordings. Some of those are 20 minutes long. Most of them, I think, are an hour or more. I've taught between 7 and 10,000 hours, if not more, in the last 17 years. And again, I'm not bragging, but I'm saying that if I hadn't done the steps, people come to me about audience and they say, I don't have an audience. And I say, well, if you reached out and made friends with 50 new people every single day, then in 100 days, you'd have an audience of 5,000 people, right? 3 months later, I shouldn't even say this, but 3 months later, probably 95% of those people, I can ask them, how many followers do you have? And they will have, without much change, the same as they had 90 days before. I feel like sometimes we just have to get down to reality. Like I can sing Kumbaya here all day long. I can give you all the Bible verses. I can talk about God. I can show you the business model. You can study 25 hours worth of my training. But if you don't do Proverbs 6, 6 through 11, you won't have a business, period. And by the way, it's not easy. I'm going to look you in the eyes for just a minute. This business is not easy. This business, I'm going to tell you this, and then we'll get back to some happy, cheery Kumbaya stuff, okay? But this business is not easy. I did only work an hour a day for 84 days when my mother was in hospital and hospice and all of that. But I didn't start my business an hour a day. I worked 40 hours a week for years before I could take 84 days off in a row to take care of my mother. And I'll tell you what, if my father-in-law found out tomorrow that he had 90 days left in his life, I just might get in my car and drive 14 hours and take my computer with me, and I might only work for 2 hours a day for the next 84 days. But it wouldn't be the end of my life. Like I wouldn't do it forever. And so many people think that they can just run this business in an hour or two a day. It doesn't, it's just not, it's not reality anymore. In some theoretical sense, could you do an hour or two of business? Yes, but you'd have to put your phone away and you'd have to not be distracted and you'd have to know exactly what you're going to do for those 90 minutes during the day. Okay, let's get back to the good stuff. All right, I want to read this. Proverbs 6, 6 through 11. Go to the ant, thy sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer and gathereth her food in the harvest. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou arise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man. Oh, that hurts, doesn't it? That hurts. And yet I think it's so true, and I think sometimes we miss it. So I want to talk about a few cases in building your business. Think about these as business models, all right? So if you're working the field, that may be God's plan. I'm not here to give you a business model. I am not here today to tell you that you should start a community or you should have a membership or, you should sell fruit by the side of the road or you should become a preacher or you should do 5-day challenges. I'm here to get your eyes on God. Whatever your business model is, everything I've talked about will help you in your business. At the end of the day, in some sense, the business model doesn't matter. If God took everything away from me today, he took my computer, he took all of my leads, he took all of my knowledge, he took everything I have, and he told me, I didn't take your brain, okay, still have your brain. Tomorrow, you're going to manage a coffee shop for 10 years. Guess what would I do for the next 10 years? Maybe on day one, I would go online and find $1,000 course on how to run a coffee shop. So I'd learn how to do it. But what would I get really good at? I'd learn how to make a coffee shop make money. Not because that's what I want to do and not because I'm bragging, but if that's what God wants you to do, go out there and get 100 times return. So I don't care what your business model is. I don't care what you sell. If God wants you to sell it, you ought to be able to work the field. Best of my knowledge, God never gave somebody a workable field and didn't give him a harvest. Jacob, Joseph, Elijah, look at the Bible. God made them successful working their land. Maybe you have a special calling. Maybe God's called you to be a speaker. Maybe you have a special calling. If you have a special calling, you should be doing that calling. I talk to so many people, folks, that tell me they have a special calling. They've had it for 20 years and they've done nothing with it. They have all the excuses in the book. I have some excuses for stuff I haven't done. So I'm not pointing fingers. I am pointing fingers, but I'm pointing them at me too. Look, if you've got a special calling, I think you should be kind of working towards it. And we have to be really careful, don't we? Because Moses had a special calling to bring the Israelites out, but he tried to do it on his own. Abraham had a special calling to have Isaac, but he cheated and he tried to get it on his own and birthed Ishmael. Remember that? At the same time, if he's given you a calling, but he's told you to wait or he's told you to prepare, don't go doing something without his. What I am trying to say is many of you have a special calling and God actually wants you using it right now. God wants you doing a weekly faith-based call online and you're not doing it. And you're only not doing it because you are intimidated or you're not willing to do it or you're afraid or whatever. You need to get over yourself. All right. So once again, if God's got a calling, it's not your time yet, wait. But if God's got a calling and you know in your heart you're not doing something God gave you to do, I'm just going to say to you, go do it. Okay. God's given you a secret sauce for you. The greatest need that you can meet. Moses met the Israelites' needs. Joseph saved people from a famine. Nehemiah built a wall. Elijah was prophecy encouragement. Esther saved the Jews. There's a special need for a just in time as this in your world. You know, he who sees a need and does not meet it, who sees the hunger and does not feed him, he sees the hungry. Their need is different than yours, but you have something inside of yourself that you should be changing lives with. Okay, so let's get into the formula now. First thing is go to God. That's the very first thing. Go to God. Get his direction. Then watch for opportunity. Then get counsel. Proverbs 12:15, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he that hearkeneth unto counsel is wise. Proverbs 11:14, where no counsel is, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. Proverbs 19:20 through 21, hear counsel and receive instruction, that thou mayest be wise in thy latter end. Proverbs 15:22, without counsel, purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established. And then work the plan that you create. And then be diligent. We've talked about that. These are the reviews. And then give to God. Celebrate and commemorate. Give God thanks. And then get ready for the next season. Our life operates in seasons, and it is time for your next season. Who's ready for your next season? Who's here because you believe God's calling you to a new season and you needed fresh inspiration? Truth of the matter is, most of what you heard today is not new to you, is it? It's just a review. It's just a review for most of you. We don't stay in the same season forever and ever. Joseph only doled grain out once in Potiphar's house. Nehemiah only built the wall once. Moses only led the people out once. Some of you have already done your once 10 years ago, and you're trying to live in the past by redoing what God gave you once. You're like, I made the best community in the whole wide world, and so I'm the best community builder, and so, I did the best 5-day challenge in the whole world, so I should do these for the rest of my life. Maybe not. Joseph only doled grain once. Nehemiah only built a wall once. Moses only led the Israelites out once. Maybe God had you hold that call for one person's need. What if I never gave this training presentation again, ever? Because it met one person's need here, right? It would be like me saying, you know what, this was such an amazing presentation. I'm just going to give this presentation 1,000 times the next 10 years, and I'm going to charge $100 every time I give it, and this is going to be my future. I would miss God's calling for my life. And I suspect that some of you are doing that. You're living in the past instead of going into what God wants for you next. So to summarize everything we've talked about today, we've got to denounce our own strength. We've got to come to the place where we're no longer doing it our strength, but in God's. And by the way, I spent so much time today kind of talking about the model and kind of getting into the verses. And as I went through it, I thought that was really, really important. If I could spend another 15 minutes on one topic, it would probably be denouncing our own strengths and coming to God with a blank slate. Like, get God right first and then let everything else follow. Get things right with God first and then let everything else follow. Don't start with the model. Don't start with, I only want to work 20 hours a week. Don't start with, I want to change certain types of people's lives. Start with God. Go to God with a blank slate. Find God's plan and then build what he wants.
We gonna start the hard stuff.
Just like in the Bible, we get to about God created the earth and he created all the animals and he created man and woman. And then pretty much after that, what kicks off the entire story of the Bible is there was a problem. And so one of the hugest problem is that the world presents get rich quick. Everybody's doing it and just follow this model. Think about that. Every business training program out there, like how to create a course. Here's how to get rich creating a course. Everybody's creating a course. Everybody's become a millionaire with this course. And just buy my course and it'll show you how to build a course that will get you rich quick, and everybody's doing it and everybody wins. Now, how many of you have bought multiple courses in the past and you never got rich quick? Everybody's actually not doing it. You ever been to a mastermind? You bought into one of those programs where like 1,000 people were going to get rich and 1,000 people logged into a group. And you found at the end of 90 days that only 3% had actually even followed the instructions. What happened to the other 97%? Well, none of them got rich quick. None of them got rich at all. Most of them never even studied the second lesson. And only 3% actually followed the instructions. And only probably 10% of the 3% that followed the instructions got any results. I've been in those classes before, and that's actually been me before. I mean, I've bought training programs and not gotten very much out of them. And it's not the training program's fault. Sometimes it might have been, but almost always it was my fault. It was always my fault because I didn't do the work. But when I did the work, I almost always got results. Almost always got results. I never got rich quick, though. I've heard people say, you've probably heard it said before, I got rich overnight after 20 years, right? I don't know how that goes, but I spent 20 years getting rich overnight because that's usually what happens, right? You do all the legwork and legwork and legwork, and then, you know, finally you get on a TV show or something and it takes off, it goes viral, and all of a sudden a whole bunch of sales start coming in. And that was a lot of the way that my business was. I mean, you know, it kind of chugged along and chugged along and chugged along, and then it went, ooh. And then, of course, there's times when it went down, and then it would chug along, and choo. What happens is when we're following the world's model, we're just looking for the cha-chung. And when the cha-chung doesn't happen, then we give up. We go buy another program. We start another model. We're like, oh, courses don't work, so I'm going to do memberships. Memberships don't work, so I'm going to do social. This social platform doesn't work, so I'm going to jump to another platform. Okay, so that's one of the big problems. The second problem is, let me just look you in the eyes for just a minute. So the second problem is, I see so many people coming to me, and when I ask them what their goal is to have an automated passive business. And so when the end result is to have an automated passive business, now we have to start filling in the blanks. We're like, okay, well, who do we have to sell to have an automated passive business? And what do we have to teach them? And how do we have to do this? It's like we're starting on the wrong side. We're starting with the model, which is, look, I just want to, you know, passive income, get rich quick, right? Passive income, get rich quick. That's where we start. And so then once we start, we're like, okay, well, what can I sell that millions of people will buy? Right. And that's how you get into fitness and make millions online and, you know, sell e-commerce stuff online. Why? Because those are hot topics. And so people are like, okay, in order to have this business, I have to have a hot topic market. And then when they actually go to do it, they don't know anything about what it is that they're doing. So they spend like a year trying to fake it until it all falls apart. Oh, and wait a second, God wasn't even in the business. So I see so many people come to me, good Christians. I had a client session with a good Christian guy yesterday, and we were talking about this exact thing. And he admitted to me, he's like, look, Sean, he says, I've been looking for this passive business that I can work like, you know, I don't remember the number is like 10 hours a week and make $10,000 a month. And I'm like, well, what do you want to teach? And I'm like, well, I don't even know. Well, it's never going to happen. Like, it's never going to, it's like a college kid getting his degree and saying, I just want to work 10 hours a week. I want to show up when I want to show up. And I want the boss to write me a check for $10,000 a month. And I'll sleep in. I'll come in when I feel like it. I'll do whatever I feel like in the business, and I'll go home when I'm ready. Now, I don't want to be critical of that because I've been there to some degree in the past. Okay. I don't know that I've ever fully bought into that. And you're probably laughing and going, well, I'm not fully there either. That's okay. It's okay. But maybe I'm going a little bit into elaboration, but I see this all the time, is that people come to me wanting the result, but they don't have any clue how to get there. And so what I'm going to do today, obviously, we're dealing with the problem. We're dealing with the sin in the garden right now. And in just a couple of minutes, we're going to talk about God. Why? Because God cleanses us from sin, from the sin in the garden. Jesus cleanses us from the sin in the garden. Okay, so we're going to talk about God today and how he's going to fix all of our problems with this. But here's the thing. He's not going to fix this by just helping us do this passive income model. He's going to fix this by radically transforming our business so that it's God-centered and so that this is flipped around. So that, in fact, we could flip this around here, but I want you to imagine that this is the foundation. God is the foundation, and then you, then your market, and then your model, which is, by the way, it's not going to be passive income, get rich quick. The world and most people are thinking about their business from the perspective of model, then market, then how do I fit in, and then God. That would be like a young kid coming out of school and saying, well, where's all the riches being made? Oh, the riches are being made in California in the gold mines in 1848. Okay, great. I'm going to thumb it all the way to California and I'm going to get rich. And of course, the main people that made money in California and Alaska during the gold rush were the people that provided the hotel rooms. They provided the shovels and panning equipment, and they provided transportation back to the mainland when you got broke and lost everything and lost your toes because it was too cold in Alaska. Those are the people that made money during the gold rush. And then finally, they try to fit into that. And then God's at the end. God is a prayer at the end of the night. God, can you please bless my business? Please bless my business. Okay, so that's the problem. We've probably all been there to some degree or another. And so now I'm going to get into God's plan. I'm going to look you in the eyes again for this. I believe, and God has given this to me very, very, very recently. And for years and years and years, I've always taught the idea of us basing our business on godly principles. And I've tried to do that in my own business as much as I thought I possibly could. I realize now I can do it more. And so I'm doing more of it as we go forward. But I'm realizing that what God really wants is for us to come completely to the end of ourselves and rely completely on him. The problem is we go to God and say, God, I have these great skills. I'm a good speaker. Can you make me a speaker? I'm a good writer. Can you make me a good writer? God, I'm going to write a book because you gave me this skill of writing. I used to teach that, folks, and I kind of regret it, except that I still think there's some truth to it. Folks would come to me. I remember vividly teaching this. Folks would come to me and they would say, hey, Sean, how do I figure out what I'm supposed to teach? And of course, I never made an effort to deflect people from God. I think I was doing the faith-based calls and inviting people to come on a regular basis. I probably taught this on a faith-based call. But I said, if you woke up one day and you didn't know who you were, and you had to ask yourself a question about who am I, and you looked at what you're wearing and you noticed you were wearing workman's overalls and you had a hammer hanging out of your pocket and you had a tape measure and you had some screws in another pocket, you might look at yourself and say, well, the tools I have would indicate I'm a carpenter. Does anybody remember that training? The tools that I have would indicate that I'm a carpenter. And so what I would teach was, and I still believe this to an element, what I would teach was, look, God birthed you and made you born with certain capabilities and characteristics. And so go use those characteristics for God. And I think sometimes that we overdo that and we just try to build stuff on ourselves. I want to give you 3 examples, and this is where I don't have the scriptural references, but I'm sure you can find them. Moses. God birthed Moses to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. God birthed him to do that. And not only did God birth him to do that, but he gave him 30 years in the palace to learn how to be a leader. I heard the other day that he was possibly the second or third in charge in Egypt as an Israelite, that the Egyptians didn't know it, I guess, but he knew who his brothers were because the Bible says that he went to check on his brothers. That's how he got himself in trouble, which when he saw one of the taskmasters beating one of his brothers. God birthed him for that assignment. But when he killed one of the taskmasters, he took control of the situation and tried to do it in his strength. Does that make sense? God birthed him for it. It would be like if he woke up and he looked at his tool belt and he's like, look, I must be a Pharaoh's assistant. I'm the good guy. I'm going to make a coup against the Pharaoh, and all these Israelites are going to rise up and they're going to take over Egypt. Like that's what he had in his mind, right? You think about that. And he went out there and he tried to do it in his own power. What that is he was trying to do what God wanted him to do, but do it on his own. What's so bad about that? The truth of the matter is, we don't even have to know what's so bad about that. It's just not God's way. And so because of that, he had to run away 40 years. I said 30, 40 years. He had to run away because Pharaoh was probably going to kill him. He had to run away, and he spent 40 years losing himself. Losing himself so much so that when God called him out of the bush, he said, God, no, not me. They'll never listen to me. And God, and he said, no, God, I can't speak. What do you mean you can't speak? He spent 40 years learning how to speak in Egypt. Of course he could speak, but he had no self-confidence left. God called him to God's plan when he was at the end of himself. Think about Joseph. God gave Joseph a great plan. God gave Joseph a great plan. Your brothers and your parents are going to bow down to you one day. Now, I don't want to overstate. I think that sometimes we do Joseph disjustice by saying that he was bragging about the dream. He told the people his dream. If I wake up in the morning and tell my family about a dream that I had and I didn't think it through, should that be held against me? I don't think so, right? The truth of the matter is, did God allow Joseph to be in prison twice? Well, a slave once and then in prison once. Just because God felt masochistic that day? Did God put Joseph as a slave and as a prisoner? Did God put Joseph as a prisoner and a slave just so that he could learn a couple lessons? I don't think so. I think God had a really good reason for it. And I wonder if the reason wasn't that he had to come completely to the end of himself and realize that he could not do it on his own. Remember King Nebuchadnezzar? He went to Daniel and he said, I had this big dream, and this dream is I had this huge tree and all the animals were resting inside of it, and the tree got cut off at the bottom. And Daniel said to King Nebuchadnezzar, He said, look, you've got a great kingdom. You're that kingdom. And all these animals, all your subjects, they rest on your branches and everything. But you're too prideful. And God's going to take your kingdom away from you. And Daniel's advice to him was, you better be good, because maybe if you're good, it won't happen. And so Nebuchadnezzar was good for about a year. And then he went out on his terrace one day and he looked over the kingdom and he said words, I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the passage in front of me. He said, look at me and my kingdom, this amazing kingdom that I have built for my glory and my honor. Again, I paraphrase. And immediately, or in a short time thereafter, God struck him down and he became basically like a wandering animal. And God saved his kingdom for him so he could come back when he came to himself. And at some point in the future, he came to himself and he said, no man builds a kingdom on his own, that God is the ultimate ruler and that God's way is the only way. And, we could go through case after case after case after case of this in the Bible. And I want to submit to you that we could spend all year, we could spend the next decade. And I'll be honest, I think in many ways, I've spent the last 17 years. I've been doing faith-based calls, which God called me to do. I've taught the word of God like God's called me to do. I've been on my knees. I've followed him. But as many of those good things I've done in my business, I think so often it was my business, but I was asking God to help me. Look, I want to save you from that. And obviously, one of the ways that we can be saved from disaster is to look at the stories in the Bible, right? We can learn from Moses, we can learn from Joseph, we can learn from Nebuchadnezzar. And I'm just going to put myself on that list. Like I don't belong on that list, but just for fun right now, I'm going to say, look, many of you have followed me for years. You've seen the good, you've seen some of the bad, you've seen the good that I've done. You've seen the work that I've done. You've seen the fruit of my work. But I tell you what I want you to see now is God being completely in charge of my business. And hopefully, maybe, possibly you can follow in that footstep. But I think the place we have to come to, I believe this stronger than I've ever believed it in the past, is we have to come completely to the end of ourselves. That we have to stop thinking that we can bring the Israelites out in our own power. We have to stop thinking that we can save the Israelites in Joseph's case in our own power. We have to stop thinking we can build our kingdom in our own power. We have to stop thinking we can build our Christian business in our own power. We have to stop thinking that we can have a speaking business because we're a good speaker. We have to stop thinking that we're going to change the world because we're a good writer. We're going to do whatever God gives us to do. And I think that when we have that reframe, everything changes.